Hey everyone, it's Travis from Student Loan Planner. I think that this is a rite of passage for every podcast host, but I had this great episode that I recorded for you. It was really helpful. It was going to be all about the Trump student loan orders and kind of what's going on in DC right now with all the chaos and everything. And then yours truly, the dunce of all student loan podcast hosts, I forgot to have the microphone be in the on position. So I recorded this great hour-long episode, and then I realized that the microphone wasn't on. So I'm recording this one again, and this is my umpteenth time recording it right now. So I'm going to be great for you, and this is going to be an amazing episode. So anyways, the stuff going on in DC right now is pretty wild. You've got all this stuff with this Trump student loan order and what that means for your student loans and just the chaos surrounding that. Another bit of news is Vice President Biden chose Kamala Harris this past week to be the vice presidential candidate in the Democratic ticket. That's also kind of interesting for what we might see with student loan reform in the future. So the primary focus of today's episode is going to be the Trump student loan order, because that's going to have the biggest and most immediate impact on your student loans, and you're going to have to figure out what you want to do in response to it. And so that's something that we're going to talk about really in great detail. Before I do get into that, let's just talk a little bit about what choosing Kamala Harris means, Senator Kamala Harris for the Democratic ticket. Her past history, it's definitely a positive for people with federal student loans trying to pursue forgiveness in general, because Kamala Harris has supported things like going after for-profit schools. When she was Attorney General, she helped bring down Corinthian colleges for defrauding students. And, I think in general, support discharging students' debt for students that attended for-profit schools that got defrauded. So I think that that's something that you could pretty much count on. If they were to win, they would go after for-profit colleges pretty hard. Other things that they would try to do, I think they would try to expand PSLF, maybe grant credit to borrowers with older kinds of loans, like FFEL loans for PSLF. So that would help some people out. In general, I think that she's come around to the idea of free public college and mass cancellation of some sort of specific type. So if you look at her history, she had a loan forgiveness program. I tried to write an article on most of the forgiveness programs for most of the major candidates, but I'm not sure if we wrote one on hers. But she basically had this loan forgiveness program that shows her sort of pragmatic center-left position pretty well. So if you're a straight-up progressive, right, it's like bumper sticker length, cancel student loans, 10,000, 30,000, whatever it is, all of it, right? If you're Bernie, cancel student loans. That's kind of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party's position. And then you had some of these more nuanced positions that are sort of establishment Democratic Party positions that are like, let's raise Pell Grants. Let's make community college free, right? It's more kind of targeted, specific, more limited, right? That's kind of like the Klobuchar wing of the party. Kamala Harris, with her proposal for student loan forgiveness, she wanted to give $20,000 of loan forgiveness for people that were Pell Grant recipients that opened businesses in disadvantaged communities, mainly low-income communities, communities of color, and who operated those businesses for 3 years. When she released this plan, I remember she got a lot of blowback on Twitter, especially from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, because it was like, jump up and down 5 times, tap your ruby slippers, try to catch the golden snitch, and then submit your application for loan forgiveness, and maybe there's a small chance you'll get it, right? I mean, in other words, there was so many steps to get this loan forgiveness program that people thought it was a little ridiculous, or at least a lot of people did online. It's a very limited, specific kind of loan forgiveness. With such a small amount of loan forgiveness, that's probably not going to incentivize entrepreneurial activity all that much over and above what would already happen anyway. Because again, it is so specific. A lot of people would not take the time to look up if they're opening a business in a disadvantaged community. And so then you'd also have to define what a disadvantaged community is. You'd have to define of what maintaining operation for 3 years meant. She scaled that back or went back on that just in the face of people saying, this is too complicated, your loan forgiveness program. But what it shows is, at their core, I think Biden and Senator Harris are both known for being more of the pragmatic center-left wing of the party, which means that if you have a student loan program that Biden's proposed, which his campaign has said costs $750 billion, we at Student Loan Planner think, after doing an analysis, that it would probably cost maybe about 4 times that. If you've had resistance to that, And also, kind of unlike some of the other programs that were proposed, like Senator Warren and Senator Sanders, the revenue sources for funding Biden's student loan plan are actually not very clear. The idea of doing, a wealth tax or a Wall Street speculation tax, I mean, those would be very expensive taxes, but they would probably fund quite a bit of things. Whereas I guess Biden's student loan program, he talks about repealing the excess business losses tax, and that's probably not going to really raise that much revenue. Basically, what that does is I think allow businesses to deduct things a little bit faster. And, businesses will probably already take advantage of that, which means that, if you repeal it, they've already gotten a lot of the benefits. So, I don't think that the student loan program coming out of the Biden campaign is, from a financial perspective, it's not realistic from a financial perspective because you haven't really come out with like the clear funding source and you haven't really demonstrated the true cost of the forgiveness program. So I think that what that means, and again, when I talk about this kind of stuff about Trump student loan orders, Biden student loan plans, know that I'm not saying what should be. I'm just saying what I think will be, which is different, right? So I'm just trying to kind of prognosticate as to where the tea leaves are going to fall versus how they should fall, in my opinion or something. So I think what will happen is with Biden's student loan plan, if they were to win, with that ticket being Biden-Harris, I think that what you would see is just some sort of pragmatic compromise position. Even if Democrats sweep, I don't think they're going to go as broad as the bill that they're supporting. So I think that, you would see probably some kind of a cancellation for student loans, but it's going to maybe be like, $10,000. And it might be $10,000 to only, lower income students, people that got Pell Grants, for example, or people that have below 6-figure incomes. I think it could be fairly limited in scope. Senator Harris has done other things like supported lowering interest rates on student loans by allowing people to refinance. She's definitely supported some positions that would make forgiveness more beneficial. So I think in reality, if you look at what the Republicans proposed with Senator Lamar Alexander's bill in the HEALS Act, so he wanted to do away with everything except for the repay program. And if you did that, obviously it would raise costs for a lot of people, but he said that if you like your plan, you're going to get to keep it. So that was one of the key points of his proposal was, okay, if you like pay as you earn or filing separately with IBR or whatever, community property loophole, whatever, then you would get to continue doing that. Think about the fights over the ACA and the whole fights over, if you like your plan, you can keep it. And then that in some cases ended up not being accurate because some of those plans didn't cover as much and they were cheaper and that didn't fit into the guidelines of the new rule. So I think that's, certainly a political kind of thing for them to want to be able to say that verbiage whenever they change the forgiveness in student loan programs. But that's good if you're a student loan borrower, because basically you're looking at one candidate where, Trump, Pence, they won. Could they try to do this like repay for everybody thing? Maybe, but it would not apply to you most likely if you already have student loans and you're pursuing forgiveness in some sort of program. If you, have not yet gone to school yet, that's kind of your worst case, I think, is the repay program would be involved. And if they ever eliminated the tax bomb along with passing repay for everybody, most people actually, your average person would actually be better off from having no tax bomb and losing the ability to file taxes separately. So like your overall people going for loan forgiveness would decrease for sure, but it wouldn't decrease by all that much with only the repay program. So those are some of the thoughts I've got about the horse race in Washington, just in terms of like, what does this stuff mean now that we have the tickets set? Now that we have like a little bit better idea of what parties, are really wanting for student loan programs and kind of where we see the fault lines that might happen. So what's interesting here is this Trump student loan order. This is the stuff that, is really the meat of this episode. And this is the stuff most of you are going to be interested in. Basically, talking about how this all came about, we'll get there. The three big questions that I see from people about this Trump student loan order, basically the Trump student loan order would extend zero interest, zero payments until December 31st, 2020 at least. So it would extend it for the rest of the year. And December 1st, Trump says that, they would have to take another look at that and they would have to make another decision basically to whether or not to extend it for even longer than that. In fact, that's probably not accurate. He'd have to probably look at it in early November, probably shortly after the election, to give adequate notification to the servicers to not contact people to start their payments again. if they're going to make it go longer than that. So it's basically this is sort of an order that was intended to carry them through the election. And if they win the election, I could see them extending it perhaps maybe another 3 months if the economy hasn't recovered much. However, if they do not win the election, I do see there's a situation where they might try to restart payments before the Democrats come back into power and then try to extend that suspension until September of 2021. Because I think at their core, President Trump and the Republicans do want payments to start again, because Lamar Alexander, the Higher Education Committee chairman in the Senate that's retiring this year, he basically kind of intimated that with his proposal of, hey, you know what? If you're not making any income, you don't have to pay anything. But if you are, then you should pay something. This is sort of the student loan orders reflecting Trump wanting to have the best electoral prospects possible by making student loans a non-issue that, he can't be attacked on. The problem is these executive orders may or may not be constitutional, and they may or may not have the power that they're claiming. So the questions I'm getting are, do these suspended payments for this Trump student loan order in October to December, do they count for student loan forgiveness? That's one question. Second question is, will my interest be suspended? Third question is does this order grant relief to borrowers in default? So CARES Act background, right? So March 13th was a day I'll remember forever, right? It was a Friday, Trump did a press conference and said, we're going to pause student loan interest and payments for 60 days. People were sending me emails. One guy sent me an email. He took a picture of the TV with Trump talking, and there was like a beer on the table. He's like, we're just hanging out Friday, just drinking a beer, listening to this press conference. And then, did I just hear what I think I heard? And, I get all kinds of emails like that. Like, did he really just say that? What does that mean? So the problem is, we don't think that the president has the authority to suspend interest on student loans. That's debatable. I'll show you why that is later. But a couple of the things he mentioned, it didn't seem like that was really fully legal. But probably what had happened is the administration had talked to Congress, and there was this attitude of doing something very fast in Washington. And so I think they'd already come to agreement that they were going to suspend interest and payments on student loans. And Congress was basically drawing up a bill to do that. And then when Congress passed the bill 2 weeks after March 13th, they actually went back in time to March 13th and retroactively dated the interest freeze and payment freeze and forgiveness payment, suspended payments counting for forgiveness starting March 13th. So that's really pretty interesting. Now, does the president have the authority to suspend student loan interest and payments basically unilaterally? The key statute that I think that matters in this, from what I've seen, is this statute called 1087 HH Section 1. So 1087 HH Section 1, this part of the U.S. Code says, in carrying out the provisions of the Higher Education Act, the Secretary is authorized to, and this is the quotes, to consent to modification with respect to the rate of interest, time of payment of any installment of principal and interest or any portion thereof, of any other provision of any note evidencing a loan which has been made under this part. Here's the issue there. It says the Secretary of Education can modify interest, principal payments, and any other provision of any loan in the Higher Education Act. So Senator Warren looks at that and says, well, that means that if the Secretary of Education has this power, then the Secretary of Education has the power to unilaterally cancel student loan debt. I mean, in theory, it has the power to cancel all 1.6 trillion. So the debate here is, what does the word any note mean? Is that statute merely giving the Secretary of Education the power to change the terms of individual loans for individual borrowers only? Is it giving the Secretary to have power to modify things for people that, say, live in a region that got hit by a tornado, that are under a natural disaster emergency declaration? Is that what it means? Is it a narrow power, or is it a really broad power? Given that Congress has the power of the purse and Congress has the power of appropriation, it kind of seems like, at least at first glance, that like the Secretary of Education couldn't just say, okay, $1.6 trillion, I'm just going to wipe that. I mean, because that's like one of the most expensive things somebody could do. And to be able to do that without any consent of Congress seems maybe at first glance like maybe dubious. But that's what Elizabeth Warren, that's the statute that she cites for this having broad powers to basically do anything. Now, I'll say that Senator Warren doesn't want to forgive all student loan debt. Her own bill would only forgive debt for people making, below six figures approximately, people that had 50,000 and less. It was a very limited form of mass cancellation. So this is really something that she wouldn't use to cancel all student loan debt. This is something that she would want to use to cancel, again, that 10 to 30,000 number that I mentioned earlier that I think is likely to play out if the Democrats win. So unfortunately, nobody is really actually calling to cancel all your student loans if you're a six-figure borrower. Bernie's the only person that's really called for that. And, it's very clear that with so many of the judges that Senator McConnell has helped get on the federal bench the past several years, I don't think there's any chance that you would have mass cancellation for six-figure borrowers. I don't even know if you would have mass cancellation for people for the $10,000. I think that that's something that obviously if the Democrats win, then they could just pass from a congressional standpoint. They wouldn't need, that's definitely legal, obviously, if you pass a bill in Congress and it gets signed. But the mass cancellation, that's going to be something that you should really monitor, because that 1087 HH Section 1, that's going to be the center of a lot of fights in the future, I predict. And that's going to probably go up to the Supreme Court because of how vague that statute is in terms of what powers it grants to the Secretary of Education, of course, who's appointed by the president. This Trump student loan order, it relies on kind of that power, I think, those implied powers from that statute. I think that's really what it relies on. What he does is he cites a different statute, because if he cited that, that's giving, definitely fuel to the fire for the arguments of progressives that section gives the president this broad power to just cancel student loans, right? So he doesn't really cite that statute in the executive order or memorandum. I'm not exactly sure which one we're supposed to call it, but basically he's citing this thing called 1087-0 Section 2. Basically, this statute, 1085-0 Section 2, defines what economic hardship deferment means. So that's what Trump says in the executive order. He says that he's directing the Secretary of Education to modify the terms and eligibility of economic hardship deferment to offer it to borrowers. So economic hardship deferment is defined in the statute of 1085-0 Section 2 as being if you're making minimum wage, making less than 150% of the poverty line, or additional factors defined by the Department of Education secretary, the words are primarily based on a borrower's income and debt to income ratio as primary factors. So the problem with this order is economic hardship deferment and offering it to people, when you're just offering it to everybody and you're not saying it's for people that, make below six figures or people that have certain characteristics with owing more than they earn, right? When you're just saying it applies to everyone, that's a very generous reading of the economic hardship deferment definition. So that might not be legal, may or may not be. It is if you take this expansive view of that earlier statute, 1087 HH Section 1, because that earlier statute basically seems super broad. But if you're taking more of a narrow interpretation of this, then it would seem like the Secretary of Education can't just broadly offer economic hardship deferment and then maybe they can't suspend interest either. So the problem is this is an unclear authority the president may or may not have. And that's the real problem with this executive order, is we don't know if it actually is legitimate or not. Obviously, you can have certainly a strong opinion one way or the other, but it's kind of like, it seems like something that the courts would need to decide if it got challenged, because it's definitely not on like super solid ground. Now, if the Secretary of Education has the power to declare an economic hardship deferment, if that power does exist, then does it count for repay IBR? Does it count for PSLF? So I looked this up. Again, the best way to find this stuff out is you have to do the research and you have to look the statutes up and look up what the specific statutes say. So based off of code 1098E, Section B7, I'm not making this up. It sounds like I don't know. It sounds like something that you do when you just want to screw with somebody, right? 1098E, Section B7, _ subsection 5. I'm joking around a little bit, but that's like, man, it was really intense looking at that stuff. Based off of that section, 1098E, Section B7 of the statutes, it says that basically the different things that qualify for student loan forgiveness not to exceed 25 years. So in other words, taxable forgiveness include, and it says the income-based payments, standard tenure, and then it says economic hardship deferment next to those. So it's very clear in the statutes that economic hardship deferment actually counts towards the 20 and 25-year forgiveness programs involved with pay, repay, and IBR. So that means if you're pursuing taxable forgiveness, that this economic hardship deferment offered to you starting in October is something that you would probably want to accept, because in the specific statutes, it says that it qualifies for forgiveness. Now, what about PSLF? Does Trump's student loan order count for PSLF? I think the answer is no. So if we look at the information here for PSLF, I looked up the ECF form. So it says that you have to make 120 qualifying payments. And I said, okay, well, what's a qualifying payment? What's the legal definition? So a qualifying payment for PSLF is something that's separate, on-time, full monthly payments made on eligible loans under a qualifying repayment plan while employed full-time by a qualifying employer. A qualifying repayment plan, what is that defined as? Qualifying repayment plans, it says, include revised pay-as-you-earn, income-based repayment, income contingent repayment, the standard tenure, and any other program that the payment is at least equal to what it would be with its standard tenure. Economic hardship deferment is completely left out of that definition. So it's pretty clear, based off of the reading of the rules, that economic hardship deferment does not count for PSLF. Now, why did it count in the CARES Act? Why is it that between March 13th and September 30th that you do get credit for payments that are suspended under the CARES Act for PSLF? Because you do get credit for those. We're talking about Trump's student loan order starting October 1st, where you would no longer get credit for suspended payments. Okay, so I want to make that clear. You do get credit for PSLF and all forgiveness programs between March and September. The question is do you get credit for it with this, further suspension Trump's ordered? So the thing is it doesn't count because the CARES Act carved out specific language to make it abundantly clear that that suspended period of payments did count for PSLF. And it was very clear because they specifically said any forgiveness program you would otherwise qualify for, these suspended payments will count as qualifying credit. So it said it in the CARES Act crystal clear. I can point to the exact sentence that it says that in. And so whenever somebody asks me that question about does the CARES Act suspended payments count for forgiveness, I can point to the specific area in the text where it does. And with these regulations, one, that with this student loan order, one, I can't tell if the whole thing is legal. And then two, I can't really point to anything other than the statutes that I mentioned, which would suggest that PSLF you don't get credit for, and forgiveness in the private sector taxable forgiveness that you would get credit for. So that's what I can point to. The problem is because of the history of things, I do think there's a good chance that Congress will come back at some point and clear up or clean up after Trump's statement on behalf of borrowers. Because at the end of the day, I do think that Congress, they do care about borrowers. They're just pretty clueless about it. So I think that there's a chance that they'll come in kind of like they did with the CARES Act and sort of backdate any future bill to October 1st to kind of take care of anybody that made the decision to defer. So just kind of think about this economic hardship deferment. This is something that you can opt out of, and so should you? We'll talk more in a second about this. The one thing I wanted to say about this student loan order is, does this help people that are in default? And the answer is, I don't think it does, because if you look at economic hardship deferment, it's only available to you if you have a federal student loan not in default. There might be powers, implied powers, based off of that 1087 HH Section 1 that allow the Secretary of Education to maybe waive the interest, waive the payments on defaulted student loans if you're using that statute with the broad implied powers to do that, right? So that might be the statute they would have to cite to suspend, collection calls and things like that. But if they did that, it gives a lot of ammunition to future efforts to use that same statute to just cancel student loan debt, which Republicans are really against. It's going to just be wild. I don't think that this executive order is really going to grant much relief to people in default, which is difficult and troubling because borrowers that are in default can get out of one of two ways. They can do a consolidation, which is by far the easier method because it just gets you out of it immediately and signs you up for an income-based plan. The second way is to do a rehabilitation program on your student loans. And the student loan rehab program requires you to make 9 on-time monthly payments of at least, I think, $5. And once you've made those 9 monthly payments on time, then your loan comes out of default and you can pick up where you left off from the perspective of your loan forgiveness credit. And then your credit report takes that negative event off of it as well. So loan rehab is a nice thing. From my experience, though, it's extremely difficult for somebody to practically achieve. And the reason for this is, like, if I told you that you had to go to the gym every second Friday of the month and you had to do it for 9 months in a row, that's going to be hard to remember to do. A lot of people are going to struggle to do that consistently, particularly if you had problems with default where you're usually low income, or maybe you're a frustrated borrower where you're confused about the system, which is how you entered default in the first place and instead of signing up for an income-based plan. And the great thing about the CARES Act is these suspended payments were counting towards the 9 months that people in default needed to get out of default. And so they only need 2 more months. And without the extension of the CARES Act, they're kind of stuck at this 7 months of credit. And you're going to have a lot of people stop that consecutive stream of payments, and they're going to enter back into default, and that's going to suck. So the people in default definitely are going to have some issues with this. Now, what are some things that could happen before 2021 with student loans because of this student loan order from President Trump? So I think there's 3 or 4 different scenarios. One is that Congress passes H.R. 7114. So H.R. 7114 is just a very straightforward bill from a House Republican that just said, extend the CARES Act until December 31st for student loans. That's basically all it says, is strike September 30th, put in December 31st. That's pretty much all it does. And that would be very clean. That would eliminate any of this question mark issues around, does this qualify for forgiveness? Can the president actually suspend student loan interest? It removes the president from citing this controversial statute that could result in student loan cancellation down the line. So that's the option that I think maybe is most likely, if I had to guess, just because I think Congress is going to get called back into session in middle of September. I think there will be some need to do something because probably some of the president's orders are not necessarily within his power, which means that people might not get those extended student loan benefits, might not get those extended unemployment benefits. And so that would probably push Congress to act even in an election year because they don't want to screw over voters. That's who gets hurt by all this. Now, so I think that that's the most likely outcome. The second outcome is that nobody challenges the orders for student loans because they're, relatively non-controversial. Let me give you an example of this. The Senate and House Republican position is we should extend the CARES Act student loan interest freeze and payment freeze until December at least. And then the Democratic position is let's extend it to September of 2021. So that's let's extend it for 3 months, and the other side is let's extend it for 12 months. Importantly, neither one of those two sides says we shouldn't extend it right now at all. That tells you that there's widespread agreement that the CARES Act interest freeze, the way it's written, should be extended. The only question is for how long. So given that there's broad agreement on that, that's why I think that it's pretty likely that they will come back retroactively and grant people credit for suspended payments that they chose to accept under Trump's economic hardship deferment that he's offering people. But let's say that they can't get anything together because it's an election year and everybody hates each other, so they can't pass anything. If nobody challenges the student loan order and servicers decide to just go along with it, then I think that what would happen is what I mentioned above. I think that, you might have the door open for future student loan cancellation because of this broad statute authority that the president would have to claim to get this done. I think that you would see, again, PSLF borrowers probably not get credit. People going for taxable 20-year forgiveness probably would get credit. So that's option 2. And then the third option is somebody does challenge the order. And so in that case, it would either be found to be legal, which would be, the same thing as nobody challenging it, or it would be found to be illegal, and then payments have to start. So those are the different things that could happen. And in terms of all this uncertainty, like, what do you do? Here's a bit of my advice. If you're doing a 20 or 25-year forgiveness program, I would accept this economic hardship deferment. I would accept it, and probably you're going to get credit for it. If you are in the PSLF program, then it's a little bit more uncertain as to whether or not you should cancel your deferment starting October 1st. The reason why I would cancel it is if you really don't like your job and you're doing PSLF, or you're doing your job basically because of PSLF, and you can't wait to get this benefit because you're going to go make a huge life change the second you get your loans forgiven. Well, if that's you, then I would probably cancel the deferment and just make the payment so you can get that credit without any uncertainty. In a lot of cases with these bills, when they do pass something kind of with retroactive clauses, then they'll go back and they'll make it so that you can get refunded money of any payments that you made during that time. So people that are kind of a little bit afraid of risk, if you really feel like if you don't get PSLF on time, you're screwed or something, then you might cancel that economic hardship deferment that you're offered starting October 1st. If you are a resident, maybe making really low payments, you might choose to cancel it as well. I think that the people that probably don't want to cancel it are people that would be making really high payments, like you're an attending, or making a bunch of money, and you'd have to pay like $4,000 a month for your PSLF program. Well, then maybe it might be a little bit less risk to just say, well, let's just defer that payment a little bit longer and just see what happens. The most likely scenario is that people will get credit for forgiveness. I think that that's probably something, again, that will happen retroactively. But the thing is this is uncertain. This is not 100% what I'm telling you, because it's a lot up in the air, right? You'd be asking me to predict a maybe not constitutional order and what's going to happen in the courts or something over this. And that's difficult to do. So I'm telling you what I think, which, knock on wood, so far, we've been pretty accurate with our forecasting, because you can kind of read between the lines, read people's positions, try to triangulate kind of everybody's goals as to what they want to do with student loans, and then know it's going to be something probably in between there. So that's why I think that they'll probably pass something that extends the CARES Act interest and payment freeze. And then I think that they will give credit to people for it eventually. But if you're really nervous, especially for people in the PSLF program starting in October, you'd want to cancel that in-school deferment. The good news is we're going to have more information on this in the coming months ahead. So you shouldn't take any rash actions before October, like late October. Okay. And the reason for that is because most of the payments based off of what we've seen actually start October 30th. The payment and interest freeze ends September 30th, but most of the servicers have opted to set the payment due date for October 30th, 2020. So that's when you have to make your first payment. So if you think about your first payment being due in late October, what that means is that gives plenty of time for a bill to develop in Congress before the election, if one is going to develop. So if it does develop, you won't have anything to worry about because it'll be more obvious, right? You don't have to cancel the deferment until you have a clear reason to do so. I'm telling you that you might have a clear reason to do so as a PSLF borrower only. Everyone else should accept it, I think, for federal student loans. And we'll know a lot more about whether or not you should cancel that in-school deferment in mid to late October. We might know as soon as mid to late September, but this is just something that happens with student loans. Remember that this is not changing your strategy at all. The reason why people have continued to book student loan plans at about the same rate as they did before this interest freeze and payment suspension is because I think that people know that what matters is your long-term plan more so than these tactical changes. So that some of the stuff I'm sharing with you about this Trump student loan order, this is really talking about tactics versus strategy. Now, tactics can still save you a ton of money. An example is somebody was not pursuing forgiveness that should have been pursuing forgiveness, one of our clients the past couple weeks, and he had made a very, very large payment or a fairly large payment to his loans, thinking that was the smart thing to do. And then I said, well, it's clear that forgiveness makes sense. And he agreed with that. And so he was really bummed about this big payment that he made. And I said, well, within 90 days, you can generally call your loan servicer and request a refund of payments you've made over the scheduled payment amount. And he said, really? And I said, well, it's not guaranteed, but it most likely will work. And so he did that and he got the money back. And so he wrote me a note basically saying, wow, like I got an immediate 10x return on this consult like today. So that was a cool feeling, right? And that's the thing about how that's a tactic that can save you a lot of money. Even without the interest freeze with this CARES Act, you can still generally request refunds for overpayments within 90 days from most servicers. So there's all these little things that if you know they can save you a ton of money. And then the strategy, again, is what matters. The idea of going for forgiveness, that's not going to be determined by the Biden-Harris administration or by the Trump-Pence administration. That's going to be determined by overall, based off of everything we know about these loan programs and based off of everything that we know that could happen with future legislation in Congress. would we forecast that forgiveness to be the best thing to do? We can look at the different scenarios, the different things that might happen, and project out what you would want to do and how you would want to react to future policy changes. So that's something that we like talking about in our consults. Know that I will not be with you during the time that this interest freeze expires under the CARES Act for September 30th. That will be right in the middle of my paternity leave, which will start probably early to mid-September, maybe last for 1 or 2 months. And so I hope to be back maybe around the election, maybe shortly thereafter. It's a little unpredictable. But the good news is my team is super amazing. They're going to be here. I think Lauren and Megan, our consultants, 2 of our consultants might be doing a couple shows. They might be helping out with the email list that a lot of you enjoy reading. So I think that you're going to be in great hands while I'm away. I feel a little guilty for abandoning you at maybe one of the craziest times ever for student loans, right? And then obviously there's this big changeover in servicers that's supposed to happen in December, which is going to be pretty wild. And we'll see if they actually go through with that, because that's going to be even more chaos. Imagine a disputed student loan order that some people say the payments need to start, some people say they don't. And then now imagine that also at the same time, the servicers have to transfer all of their records over to new servicers in a lot of cases, which is just going to create pure chaos. But the thing about pure chaos is if you have a map, if you have the rule book, then you can navigate that chaos way better than others. And instead of you having to spend your time navigating the chaos, figuring out what the rules are, this is all we do. It's Student Loan Planner. We're this wonderful little niche that just tries to spend time figuring out what you need to know so that you don't have to worry about it that much. I mean, that's kind of my goal, is to provide you guys clear information. I'll say that, if you do want to get a consult from me personally, I'm done at the end of August. I think those consults are almost all booked up, but you might check for that. And then also my team's going to be doing the consults basically, I think, until November or December. And they do 80% of the plans now anyway. So you're in really good hands with them. Just keep your head up. There's going to be a lot of chaotic news. And a lot of times uncertainty and chaos can breed anxiety, but it's not something that should make you anxious, because we're only talking about, how much money are you going to save? Is it going to be even more, or is it going to be kind of what you already saved? No matter how you slice it, that's a good thing. It's a positive thing. And you might need to take specific actions, which we'll let you know about when this interest freeze expires. But the good news is there's this verse I like in the New Testament that says, worry about tomorrow, for today will bring worries enough of its own. That's a really awesome kind of way to think about it, because you don't have to worry about your student loans until the late October. So just remember Halloween, right? Halloween, we won't be trick-or-treating this year, but you're going to get your student loans. You can decide if your student loans are scary or not on Halloween. That's approximately when the payments are all set to resume, if this Trump student loan order ends up not being legally allowable and ends up not being legal, right? So the earliest you have to make a decision is late October. Remember, if you have private loans, then you should be refinancing right now, on studentloanplanner.com. If you go to the refinance student loans button in the menu, you're going to see some of the lowest rates we've ever seen on student loans. We're seeing that also just because of mortgages, right? Mortgage interest rates have fallen a lot. People have been refinancing mortgages like crazy. So student loan interest is also super low. And, while I would not recommend refinancing federal loans with this uncertainty around interest suspension continuing, I would recommend refinancing your private loans right now and getting a lower interest rate on those because of just historically low levels on interest rates. Take action during this time. Focus on saving and investing for your future. Take this money away that you would normally have to put towards your loan, sock it away for future goals, and just stay sane, stay calm. We've got you. Don't worry about this stuff. It's chaos, but luckily Student Loan Planner has your back. Thanks, everybody.